Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back to our Marine Money Greater Bay Area Ship Finance Forum. We are now going to kick off the third and final session of today's conference, which will be presented in two separate panel discussions. So the first of the two panels is entitled An Outlook on the Commercial Principles in Hong Kong, which will look at recent studies on tax concessions proposals being carried out by the Hong Kong government, aiming to attract more shipping and commercial principles to Hong Kong, and what factors make Hong Kong the ideal place for shipping companies to grow their business. For members of the audience who may wish to submit questions, you can send your questions by typing them into the chat box, as you can see here on the control panel on your screen. I will receive your questions, and at the end, towards the end of the panel discussion, I'll select maybe one or two questions to ask the panelists on your behalf. Moderating the discussion today is Mr. Edward Liu, who is a partner at the law firm Hill Dickinson and is also a principal representative of the China Liaison Office of the International Chamber of Shipping. So, Edward, thank you very much for moderating, and I hand it over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew. And it's really my great pleasure to be a moderator of this very distinguished panel discussion. And let me, of course, introduce our panel members first. They are Mr. Angad Banga, Chief Operating Officer of Caravel Group, which is one of the largest ship management companies in the world. And we also have Mr. Wellington from the Cruise family, who is the Executive Director of Valles Steamship, which is the longest established local ship owners in Hong Kong. And also Mr. Martin Rowe, who is the Managing Director of Clarksons Platou Asia, which of course, no doubt, is one of the, probably the largest ship brokering house in the world as well. So as Andrew just introduced to this panel, the topic of this panel discussion is about how could the Hong Kong government and the industry would attract more commercial principals, which are the ship owners, operators, and managers to come to Hong Kong. So as we all recall, in her 2018 policy address, the chief executive of Hong Kong government, Mrs. Carrie Lam, put forward 8 measures to support and enhance the growth of the high value added shipping services, such as to facilitate Hong Kong ship leasing business and maritime insurance business by providing tax concession. And now it's about two and a half years later. Most of these 8 measures, we have been very pleased to see that have already been all being implemented. For example, like last year, that we have the new ship leasing regime announced by the LegCo. So apart from these 8 measures, in that policy address, Mrs. Lam also expressed that the government would consider carrying out additional policies to encourage more industry stakeholders, including, as I said, the ship owners, operators, and managers, to make Hong Kong as their business base. And therefore, we understand that a task force has subsequently been set up under the Hong Kong Maritime Port Board to examine further tax incentive for shipping commercial principles. Angad, I understand that you are one of the members of the task force. So please, would you let us know more details about the task force and how is the progress on the relevant study? Angad, please.
And thanks very much, Edward, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you very much to Marine Money for inviting me to be a panelist along with this esteemed group today. Thank you. Edward, as you rightly pointed out, the Hong Kong government has begun to actively promote the maritime industry and all connected services, whether that is the development of a world-class international shipping register or advancements in port and logistical services, or even incentivizing shipping companies through favorable tax policies and promoting maritime services. The Hong Kong government has been able to do this with confidence because we know we are good at it and have proved this throughout history in developing this barren rock to Asia's world city through global trade. As many would be aware, in 2020, the Hong Kong government implemented the hugely successful ship leasing tax concessions, which contains profit tax concessions for qualifying ship lessors and ship leasing managers. This ordinance also incorporates anti-abuse provisions to safeguard the integrity of the tax system and also comply with the latest international tax rules, including the OECD BEPS measures. I think if we've all been reading the newspapers in the last couple of days, I think a lot of this is getting a lot of media attention, again, given what's happening with the G7. Notwithstanding that, as a result of this, I believe Hong Kong has seen an extremely strong growth of qualified activities under this tax incentive, which I believe has further supported the growth of the maritime sector in Hong Kong. Industry players such as cargo owners, vessel owners, charterers, managers have a very symbiotic relationship, and addressing the needs of just one subcomponent of the ecosystem is frankly just not enough. The broader maritime ecosystem is very intertwined, and to create a thriving ecosystem, we need to frankly work together to attract a host of these commercial principles, given the nature of how the different segments work together across the supply chain. Therefore, I think as Hong Kong looks to perhaps reestablish itself as a global maritime center, any and all tax policies need to consider these interconnected relationships. With this in mind, Edward, as you've also mentioned, a task force has been established to leverage the success of the tax leasing regime and evaluate how this could potentially be extended to other commercial principles in the broader maritime ecosystem. Unfortunately, I'm unable to comment in more specific detail at this stage, but I can say though, the task force is in place and we have been working together for a short while to evaluate different potential solutions to attract these commercial principles that we've discussed to either establish their operations in Hong Kong or grow their operations in Hong Kong and build this, broader ecosystem of the different parties all together. And I think that really is the goal of what we're trying to achieve. That said, notwithstanding the tax concessions, I think Hong Kong continues to be an extremely favorable and competitive environment for the maritime ecosystem, and one which I think needs to be carefully considered whenever we're thinking about any tax policy. I think to explain this further, there's probably 5 areas that I think are worth highlighting, which I'm sure we'll talk in more detail today as well. Firstly, as we all know, Hong Kong is a global financial hub. The relationship between finance and maritime is symbiotic. Finance is a key connection to the cargo, in trade finance to facilitate global trade, vessels take ship finance or ship leasing to support asset ownership, and lastly, think capital markets for risk management, such as hedging of exposures, be it freight or underlying commodity. Second, as we all know, Hong Kong provides a favorable business environment and a strong macro environment. Both of these are crucial for global business, and I think being at the doorstep of China is obviously a very favorable place to continue to be, given the influence that China has on the global maritime and commodities industry. I think, in connection with the theme of today's conference, we as an industry here in Hong Kong must prepare to ensure that shipping is a key beneficiary of the economic growth that Hong Kong and the Greater Bay Area as a whole, I think, is set to enjoy in the years to come. Third, Hong Kong has a very strong labor supply of maritime professionals in the financial, legal, and insurance cluster. And I think this talent pool is extremely important for the development and growth of the Hong Kong maritime industry. I think if the people are not there, there's really only so much other policies can do. Fourth, while a lot of people may not see this, but I do believe that Hong Kong is a leader in innovation, which I think is important given the technological changes that we're witnessing at record pace, which have only garnered in steam since the COVID-19 pandemic. And again, connected to the broader GBA area, I think the next step from here is to really focus on technological innovations between the Greater Bay Area, Shenzhen, and Hong Kong, and leveraging the expertise and research capabilities of both. And fifth and finally, I think Hong Kong provides a sound legal framework and arbitration system for dispute resolution. And Edward, you'll know more about this than most of us, but I think the recent inclusion of Hong Kong as a dispute resolution venue by BIMCO is a testament to this, and I think will further enhance Hong Kong as a maritime center. And so I'd be happy to share more thoughts on this as we continue our discussion, should time permit, but hopefully that gives you a bit of an overall view of at least my standpoint in how this is coming together. Thank you.
Understood, Angad, very helpful and actually very comprehensive. Though that I appreciate you cannot disclose too much details of the task force study, but again, from what you have said, is that my understanding correct? Actually, despite at the very beginning, the task force is to set up to study more about the tax incentive for attracting the commercial principals, but actually during your study, it is more than tax, right? It's more than tax, the relevant supporting policies will be.
So I think that the purpose of the task force has really been around tax and following, as I mentioned, the ship leasing tax concessions. But I don't think that we can have conversations around tax in isolation when we're talking about the broader commercial principles, given the nature of, as I said, how intertwined the broader ecosystem is. If you're focused on just the asset or just the cargo or just the finance, I don't think will facilitate the end goal. So we kind of need to look at this entire ecosystem, as we talked about, on what is the definition of a commercial principle, what activities do they entail, are those activities in Hong Kong today, where do those activities exist, and then trying to create obviously a framework, with tax being one part of that, to facilitate bringing that business into Hong Kong or increasing that presence into Hong Kong, provided that we can continue to safeguard the integrity of the Hong Kong tax system and obviously the global regulations around some of this.
Understood. So when we would expect to hear the result of your study, actually? Do you expect that, for example, for this year's policy address, that the chief executive will include those measures in her policy address?
Wow, Edward, you're putting me on the spot for that one, in front of everyone, to put a timing on that. I think those of us that have lived in Hong Kong a long enough time, I think it's probably difficult for me to put a timeline on something that is out of my control. But look, jokes aside, the task force is working very hard towards this. We're meeting quite often, and so I think, given a lot of the heavy lifting was done by a lot of our colleagues that drove the ship leasing part onwards, hopefully we're able to leverage what they've done, that we can make this a shorter time frame. And so a lot of where we are today, I think, is because of the hard work that came before this task force.
Yeah, understood. I believe that the whole industry actually is very keen to know about the new policies to support the Hong Kong shipping development. So let's now turn to Wellington. As the principal organization for ship owners and maritime service providers, Hong Kong Shipowner Association has been working with the government on various issues with a view to strengthening the maritime cluster. Indeed, we all know that actually the Chinese National 14th five-year plan announced in March this year clearly support Hong Kong to consolidate and enhance its status as an international shipping center. So Wellington, as the Deputy Chairman of Hong Kong Shipowner Association and the Executive Director of Valles Steamship, one of, as I said, the longest established local ship owners in Hong Kong, please would you share with us on how could Hong Kong shipping businesses make good use of the nation's support, and in particular, the opportunities that you think surrounding from the Great Bay Area development, as well as the Belt and Road initiative, to further strengthening and developing Hong Kong's maritime cluster, or any action plan that you think would be taken by Hong Kong Shipowner Association in the next 2 or 3 years. We know that you will be the chairman of the Shipowner Association in the next year. Wellington, please. No, I think you're still muted. No.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah, okay. Sorry. Technical problems. We envisage more opportunities because of the new national policies, such as the Belt and Road initiatives, the GBA development plan, and the 14th five-year plan, as you mentioned correctly, Edward. Indeed, the 5-year plan has given both direct and indirect benefits to Hong Kong's maritime cluster. On the one hand, I mean, as you mentioned, it has consolidated Hong Kong's position as the international maritime center. On the other hand, it has reaffirmed reform and innovation as the fundamental driving forces for a new development pattern, which is the dual circulation. I mean, we expect economic growth from this dual circulation, which is the domestic circulation and international circulation, would increase global trade volume and therefore give rise to more business opportunities for maritime and maritime-related service industries. Hence, I think the key for Hong Kong shipping community to make good use of these national goals and policies is to play an active role, that is to be active in giving views in the delivery of the policies, to ensure that the support measures are effective and helpful to them, and then any regulatory requirements would be reasonable and practical. And as for individual enterprises, my advice is that they should go with the flow. Always go with the policies, pay attention to the details, and seize opportunities whenever and wherever available to them. As for the action plans to be taken by HKSOA in the next 2 to 3 years, I mean, without doubt, the pandemic has changed the world. I mean, everyone is being affected. The whole maritime community, I mean, all the maritime community stakeholders, just like you, me, including HKSOA, I mean, we all must adapt to the new normal, which will be a lot of new and changing circumstances. All along, the HKSOA has been very vocal and a well-respected voice of Asia. I would envisage that in the next couple of years, as a trade association, we'll continue to pursue the interests of the shipping community at all levels. Specifically, for example, at the local level, we'll continue to put forward our suggestions, I mean, which is practical and practicable to the government to address urgent issues, such as the pandemic-related issues, I mean, which includes crew change, seafarer vaccinations, and insurance issues arising from the pandemic. At the national level, we'll continue to maintain close liaison with the mainland authorities and stakeholders for cooperations and partnerships. As a matter of fact, the association is planning 2 delegation visits to GBA and Shanghai later this month. We'll be meeting with our counterparts to exchange views of common concern and to explore opportunities for joint venture. At the international level, we will of course continue to participate in the global decarbonization efforts. The IMO targets are no easy task to achieve for sure, so we need collective wisdom and collective efforts. Thank you, Edward.
Yeah, thanks, Wellington. So just one very quick question. As the principal ship owners, one of the principal ship owners in Hong Kong, if you are asked by a foreign ship owner saying that, Wellington, tell me just 1 or 2 sentences, what makes Hong Kong the ideal place for the commercial principals to grow their business, grow my business, and why I need to invest in Hong Kong? Then would you please let us know the answer in the absence of yet the study result from Angad about those new policies?
Well, I mean, obviously, I need to have a disclaimer first. I mean, I'm from Hong Kong, so definitely my answer would be a bit biased. But I think Hong Kong is, I mean, there are many successful, good shipping maritime centers in the world. But I think Hong Kong has a very unique position. I mean, that is different from other places, which, I mean, a lot of the companies or people in Hong Kong, we all know very well the Chinese mainland market, and at the same time, we're in close touch with the international scene. So I think we're in a very good position. I mean, if for any foreign companies, if they were to want to make establishments in the Asia area, in the region, I think Hong Kong would be, I think, the first place they should think about.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
I believe so, because like the International Chamber of Shipping, when they opened their 100-year, since the 100-year establishment, the first overseas office, they chose Hong Kong as the first the home of the China Liaison office. So indeed, I do agree. So actually, we have now so far talked a lot about from the perspective of the commercial principles, again, like the ship owners, operators, and managers, which are, from my point of view, and I believe that you all agree, is the foundation of a solid and thriving maritime cluster. Of course, apart from the commercial principles, a healthy maritime cluster also relies on the other shipping service providers, including Martin, like you, as the shipbrokers, and me, of course, as the maritime lawyers. So, Martin, would you please share with us your views as to the supporting measures that we have just heard from Angad and Wellington, and anything that you think are also important for the government and the industry to do together to foster the continual growth of our maritime cluster, in particular, the development of the high value added maritime services in Hong Kong, like the brokers and the lawyers. Martin, please.
Well, thank you, Edward. We're delighted as Clarksons to be able to participate on this august panel, and we're grateful to you for moderating, Edward, and also to the organizers for having us on today. I would certainly agree with the sentiments expressed both by Angad and Wellington about what Hong Kong can do together with the various industry stakeholders, both governmental and non-governmental, to make Hong Kong a more attractive place to do business. You know, as Clarksons, we've been in Hong Kong now since 1988. That's 33 years, so a third of a century. And obviously, we've seen a lot of changes in that time, and other maritime centers within Asia have grown up during that period of time. I would say that probably back in '88, Hong Kong was no question about it, was the preeminent maritime center within all of Asia. Obviously, we've seen tremendous growth from Singapore during that period of time. We've been very fortunate that post handover in '97, the government in Beijing has been very instrumental in promoting Hong Kong as an important international maritime center, and that process continues. From the services standpoint, of course, the reason that services are here, whether it's law firms or whether it's the P&I clubs or whether it's the shipbroking companies like ourselves, is that the principals are here. Whether it's the ship owners or the ship charterers, those are the big fish, and we as the services companies, really the minnows that are feeding off the business that the charterers and the ship owners are doing. So most important thing is to have that critical maritime cluster, firstly, of the ship owners and the charterers, and of course the port still continues to be an important part of Hong Kong as well. But from a shipbroker's perspective, from our perspective, obviously the industry is very cost sensitive. I think one of the things that hinders Hong Kong, it's a fantastic maritime center, we can all agree on that, but the two factors which have hindered Hong Kong and which are hard to address is that money, kind of like water, tends to take the path of least resistance. And in Hong Kong, we've got two quite resistive factors, and that is the price of commercial property and the price of residential property. So when it comes to bringing people from outside of the territory, maritime professionals, into Hong Kong into the services sector, those are two very big factors, along with everything that goes with it, whether it's schooling and so forth, and all the other lifestyle choices. Fortunately, Hong Kong is a fantastic place to live, but it is still an expensive place to live. So it's great that the government is taking this initiative and that the task force is working to look at ways to make Hong Kong not just tax attractive, but tax efficient in terms of what we do here, because those are ways that we can enhance our competitiveness as a maritime center for the services. I think the other thing is that we've got great people working in the industry here in Hong Kong, young professionals coming into the industry, but we could be doing more to do that. And I know that Ms. Sabrina Chow, the new incoming chairman of BIMCO, one of her great passions is to promote shipping as a profession for young people. I think that's something we need to be doing more of here in Hong Kong and continuing to promote it. To really, so that young people can see that shipping is quite a sexy career to be involved in, that it's something exciting, dynamic, and that we are doing something to really build world trade, and that it is an critically important industry, not just for Asia, but for the world. So these are all things that we as industry stakeholders need to be doing in order to keep Hong Kong an attractive place to be doing business for the shipping services sector. So I think we're grateful to the government in Beijing, and we're grateful to the Hong Kong government for helping to foster Hong Kong's attractiveness as a maritime centre. But I think there's more that we can be doing as industry stakeholders as well. And I think on one final point is that for the services sector, be it lawyers, P&I clubs, shipbrokers, that in order for them to continue to do business here and to be attracted to do business here, also the principals in Hong Kong need to be using those services in order for that to happen. If the principals here are to be using brokers in, say, London or Singapore, as opposed to brokers in Hong Kong, well, then that's less attractive to the brokers to using Hong Kong as a maritime centre. So we all kind of have to do a bit. We all have to be mutually supportive in order to keep that critical mass going. We've got that critical mass here in Hong Kong. I think that Hong Kong has a fantastic future ahead of it as a maritime centre, but all of us need to be playing our role within that to make it a continuing attractive maritime centre.
Indeed, that's very encouraging, actually. And I believe that after people heard from you that not only the commercial principals, but also like us, the maritime services providers would come to Hong Kong. But of course, that with the booming commercial principals pool, then we will have a booming maritime cluster. Because of only one minute left, so the last question I would like to put to Angad again. You know, same question that I asked Wellington. So very brief answer that what I would expect as a ship owner, if I'm a ship owner outside Hong Kong, then why I should choose Hong Kong instead of, for example, if even I'm eyeing the business opportunity from China, why I should not go to like Shanghai or Shenzhen or something, but Hong Kong is my ideal place for the investment.
Sure, Edward, you keep putting me on the spot. I don't know what I said to you earlier before this, that I get all the difficult questions. Look, jokes aside, Wellington covered it really, really well. But if you ask me for kind of one point, I would perhaps go back a little bit to I guess, the roots of how I made my introductory comments. And I think in today's highly competitive environment, trading, ship owning, and I think with the evolution of how global trade is changing, access to capital is critical. And I think Hong Kong as a global financial hub, combined with the fact that, you know, over 70 of the largest 100 banks, and then the ship financing tax regime, I think Hong Kong is really a key center to access quality and highly competitive financing, which I think is really, really important to a ship owner as they think about the economics of their underlying asset. And then I think I alluded to this at the beginning as well, is I think the Hong Kong as a flag and the shipping register is also extremely compelling. And the combination of those two over and above everything that Wellington said, I think is the pitch I would give to a ship owner.
Yeah, great, very helpful answer. And indeed, I hope that our audience have heard from this very comprehensive and very insightful views that will be more determined if they are already in Hong Kong, will expand their business in Hong Kong. And if they are not yet in Hong Kong, they will come to invest in Hong Kong. So Andrew, because of the time is already up, I now turn the control back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edward. Thank you very much to the panel as well. We have just one comment from my side. Earlier in the conference today, we heard from Hua Kwong, who has set up a crewing and training office in Shenzhen recently, and they said, you know, their point was that the Greater Bay Area will open up opportunities for young people in the region to get better training and to learn from the Hong Kong, from Hong Kong's way of doing business, and the Hong Kong people can travel to, other parts in the region and learn from what they're doing. So I think that it's a point that goes to what Martin was saying about training kind of a stronger, smarter workforce. And then just one question from the audience, and I'd like to perhaps direct it to Angad as well. Sorry, Angad, for having me. But the question that actually was posed to another panel earlier today was about the recent minimum global tax agreement that was agreed upon by the G7 nations, and how that may impact the kind of considerations that the government in Hong Kong are currently making for kind of a tax, tax concessions in Hong Kong?
Yeah, Andrew, it's a great question, and unfortunately not one that I believe I can give a great answer to at this stage, just because I think it's being voted on Friday and Saturday, and then we'll really see how some of this comes through. But a crux of what's being addressed, and I think I again mentioned it when I talked about the ship leasing tax concessions, is ensuring that there is compliance with the OECD BEPS measures, which is effectively base erosion of profits. And that's really to shift kind of where the activity is being generated to lower cost tax jurisdictions to ensure that that benefit comes through. And I think with any tax policy, that I think is what is being avoided in Hong Kong, i.e. anything that is being done is ensuring that the integrity of the global tax systems and the international tax rules are not, that we're adhering to all of that. And so I think once this comes through, we'll need to go back and really address how this is being addressed as part of the legislation itself. But it's not, anything new per se. I think the question really has been about the U.S. joining and what the actual number has been, but the OECD has been addressing this for a while.
Thank you very much, Angad. So once again, thank you, Edward, Angad, Wellington, and Martin. Thanks for keeping it direct and relatively short. Great discussion. From our side, we're always interested to see how developments will continue and shape the future of Hong Kong as a maritime hub.